Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Water for Texas 2025 conference. As you may have heard, we've had an overwhelming response to our conference this year. We're sold out. That's awesome. I think we have a list of over 700 folks who plan to attend this year, so we're excited. We're thrilled to have everyone here, and we're excited to see a packed house. This certainly confirms that the water industry professionals and our state leaders recognize the importance of coming together to discuss solutions to secure water future for Texas. This conference exists because the actions we take and the decisions we make today will have effect on generations to come. And I know that we are all committed to water availability, water supply, and securing our water for Texas. We have a very important list of speakers, a lineup of speakers today in sessions focused on conversations about how we can define and achieve a lasting water legacy for our amazing Lone Star State. One of the hot topics this year has been the growth in Texas. So I'm so excited to introduce our opening keynote speaker from the Texas Demographic Center in just a few moments to talk about demographic trends and projections and the impact on Texas's water future. After this, we have a very busy agenda today. We have lots of great breakout sessions, lots of great speakers, and don't forget our ticketed keynote luncheon today with filmmakers Ben Masters and Jay Clayburgh. So I think Sarah is going to be moderating that panel, and we're really excited about that as well. So are you guys ready to get started? Yes, let's go. So I'm pleased to welcome to the stage the Texas State Demographer, Dr. Lloyd Potter. Welcome, Dr. Potter. The governor of Texas appointed Dr. Potter as a Texas State Demographer in 2010. That's nearly 15 years ago. It's been a long time. He's a professor of sociology and demography at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where he serves as the director of the Texas Demographic Center and the Institute for Demographic and Socioeconomic Research. Dr. Potter holds a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology from Texas A&M. Oh no. It's already started. A Master's of Science degree in Education from the University of Houston at Clear Lake, a Ph.D. in Demography and Sociology from the University of Texas at Austin. Where are my horns? All right. And a Master's Public Health degree from Emory University. And so we're just so thrilled to have someone who is so versed in all the things that are really important to us when we're making decisions about water supply, demographics, population, and many of those things. So please join me as we welcome Dr. Potter to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you all this morning. And this is, I think, kind of water is one of the most urgent and important things for Texas right now, largely because of what I'm going to be talking about this morning. Let me first say that the Texas Demographic Center is supported by the legislature. We're housed at the University of Texas at San Antonio. We have an office here in the Clements Building in Austin. And we produce the population estimates and projections for the state, estimates every year, projections every other year. And they are fairly heavily used by the Water Development Board, and then of course a number of other state agencies, but also the private sector, cities and counties and so on. So we disseminate data, and then we also have strong partnerships. We have an affiliates network. If you're interested in that, go on to our website and we can certainly facilitate getting you connected there. I'll be talking a little bit later about we're going to have a conference in May, so I'll tell you, that'll be kind of at the end. I'll kind of tell you what we're going to be doing there. Okay, so let's start talking about population change that we've experienced. You can see that Texas has somewhat systematically and continually been growing, and our proportion of the population that is the US population that's in Texas has been increasing to where now we're at like 8.8% of the total population. And you can see that most of the growth that we've been experiencing in the US has been in southern states, and of course Texas is there. When we look at estimated annual population change for the last a little more than a decade, you can see that Texas has dominated population growth in the country. Florida is a little bit behind Texas, and you can see California started declining and now is increasing a bit. Same thing with New York and Illinois. But again, Texas is driving much of the growth that we're experiencing in the United States. When we look at population estimates since the last census, you can see that Texas has now over 31 million people. We added more population than any other state. And we're growing faster than all but one other state. So we're growing fast and we're growing significantly. If you look at our population change, if you calculate population change per day, you can see actually last decade, between 2010 and 2020, we grew at a rate of about 1,000 people per day on average. During the pandemic, our growth slowed a little bit to where we're only growing at 900 per day. When we come out of the pandemic, however, all of a sudden it picked up pretty dramatically, where we're now almost at 1,500 per day. And then more recently, 22 to 23, 1,600, and now the most recent data, we have 1,500 per day. So we're growing significantly. Frequently, when people look at these numbers, they think all those people are moving here. Most of them are moving here, but we are growing from natural increase, more births than deaths, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. That's not working. Uh-oh. Don't know what's going on there. Should have a map there. Uh-oh. I do have this on a flash drive if we need to put it on. So anyway, I'll tell you what's on these slides. Okay, so when we look at when we look at the population in Texas, oh, there we go. Okay. I always hate that when that happens. You know, it's kind of awkward when you put up a blank slide and you think there should be something there. So if you look at the population in Texas, we have what we refer to as a population triangle with Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston at the points. That's where most of the growth, I was talking about all the 400,000 some odd Texans that we add every year. Most of that growth is occurring within this population triangle. That's not to say there isn't growth occurring in the lower Rio Grande Valley, out west, and so on, but most of the growth is happening there. And if we look at, some of you, you're all water people, I assume, so you probably are familiar with John Wesley Powell and the 100th Meridian, which kind of goes right through Texas, and his statement was it's wet east of the 100th Meridian, and it's dry west of the 100th Meridian. And then, of course, there's people that seem to think that the wet-dry line is moving further and further east. And if you look at that, it's kind of right along I-35. So we have this issue in terms of rain that's kind of right at the point where much of our population is existing in Texas and where it's growing very, very quickly. Here, of course, are the reservoirs and the surface water. And if you look, the reservoirs certainly to the west of the 100th Meridian are very important. Certainly if we look at the Panhandle, agriculture is like the biggest consumer of water. And it's basically just really using a lot of water. And the aquifers are definitely kind of going down, not just in West Texas, but kind of all over the state. And then, of course, with surface water, all you have to do is walk out to one of our lakes in the hill country, and you can see that we're stressed in terms of water, and certainly if you have a lakeside property, it's no longer a lakeside property. It's kind of, this little stream is, or at least I recently went to Medina Lake outside San Antonio. It's like a little stream kind of going through there, and all the docks are kind of just sitting out in people's yards now. So if we look at where the population change has been occurring, so again, I'll highlight this I-35 corridor, where we just have tremendous growth occurring all the way, really from Laredo all the way up to Oklahoma along I-35, but mainly from San Antonio up to Oklahoma. Just tremendous in-growth occurring. I mentioned I live in San Antonio. I drive back and forth from San Antonio to Austin quite frequently. And I've been doing that for at least 15 years, and I've seen tremendous changes. And many of you have probably had similar experiences driving back and forth. Just the number of apartment complexes and housing developments that have gone up. I mean, it's just amazing if you kind of compare the two. And I actually saw a picture of Austin, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, and then now. And the skyline is completely different in just 10 years. It's kind of impressive. Now, if we look at, I mentioned components of population change. So Texas, well, all places change by natural increase, births minus deaths, and that's the green column here. And then international migration, so those are people that are moving to Texas from other countries. And then domestic migration, those are people that moved into Texas from other states. And you can see, starting in like starting in about 2016 or so, we started seeing declines in natural increase as a proportion of our population, numeric and proportion of our population change. Then that started picking up post-pandemic. So we saw fertility rates decline, and now they're picking up a little bit coming out of the pandemic. If we look at international migration, we saw significant decline starting in 2016 down to 2021. Again, coming out of the pandemic, then it really picked up. And I'll also note here that these are our Census Bureau population estimates, that they've changed their sources of data on international migration. So now they're actually doing a better job incorporating data on refugees, or they call them humanitarian migrants. So those are now represented in these particular, and so we see all of a sudden, when they did that, all of a sudden the international migration is now more than half of our population change. And then when we look at domestic migration, that picked up until 2022, and now it's kind of declined a little bit. So the point I'm trying to make here with this is that the dynamics of population change in Texas vary from year to year. When we look at the amount of growth that we experience from births minus deaths, domestic migration, and international migration. And then here's just kind of showing you the same thing in stacked columns. And you can see there that kind of highlights in 23 to 24 that international migration was more than half of our population change in that year, with domestic migration being a much smaller and natural increase accounting for more population change than domestic migration. Now, one of the things I want to highlight when we think about infrastructure is when we have more people, they demand more. They want, if you have somebody that moves here, we need a new house for them, or a new housing unit for them. So we have to build, so we see, I mentioned all the construction that we're seeing. So that's happening, but then those people move into the house and they probably bring a car or two with them. So of course then our highways get more congested. TxDOT's very actively working to try to keep up with that, to try to ensure that our cars and freight are continuing to move. But then we also turn on electricity. More people are coming and turning their air conditioners on and their lights and so on and so forth. That we've certainly seen struggles and stress on our ability to generate and distribute power in the state. I think hopefully we're on the other side of the big freeze, and that we'll continue to have ample power. But then of course water is another big thing. And if you have people, you need water. I mean, of course, that's one of the basic necessities of life, of course. But the people individually need water, but then all of the infrastructure that comes with them needs water. So of course, if people are coming here because jobs are being created, and the jobs are either manufacturing or they're going to need something for processing stuff. So there's more water, and then of course, agriculture is another big consumer of water. So the point being that when we grow from migration, that's what puts stress on our infrastructure. Growth from natural increase, you're not adding a new household. You're not needing to create a new housing unit. Power is not going to be that much more. Water is not going to be that much more. There's probably not going to be another car associated with it. It's really domestic and international migration that puts stress on our infrastructure. Okay, when we look at the distribution of population change, these are the counties that grew the most. In the most recent year, we have estimates. And you can see Harris County, Houston, was the most significant growing county in the country, and yet it has net out domestic migration. So there's more people moving out of Houston, or the Houston area, than are moving into it, domestic migrants. International migration offsets that. And then also Houston, or the Harris County area, has a relatively young population that are in the reproductive years, and so they're growing a lot from natural increase. And then if you kind of go down the list there, you can kind of see, all of these counties essentially are urban core counties, or what I would call suburban ring counties, but close to the urban core, as opposed to further out. And you're, I'm sure, familiar with most of these counties. And I should point out that these are all the counties where we're seeing significant growth occurring. And I'll talk more about that. Here's cities. And for the most recent year, we have data for cities. See, San Antonio was first, Fort Worth second. But if you could just kind of go down the list there, they're either urban core cities or they're suburban ring cities that are growing very significantly and quickly. When we look at percent change, this is an indicator of the speed of change. So how fast is population change occurring? When we look at counties or places that are growing quickly, it's almost always from migration. I mean, the quick growth is happening largely from people moving there. Growth from natural increase tends to be a bit slower. And if you look at those places that grew a lot, if you look at all the suburban ring counties around each of the urban core, the darker green area, those are the places that are growing fast because that's where people are moving. So the growth that we're experiencing from migration is largely happening in these suburban ring counties around our urban cores. And then here's highlighting these counties, the fastest growing counties. All of these are in basically suburban ring counties. And I want to highlight the proportion of their growth that's from domestic migration. I mean, it's almost all of their growth is from domestic migration. So again, fast-growing places are largely growing because of people moving there. Then here are the fastest-growing cities. Salina is up in the Collin County. I could go down and tell you where all these are, but essentially, if you look at those counties that were growing fast, these are cities in those counties. Okay, so when we look at population change and the drivers, notice I kind of was emphasizing that domestic migration is a big factor on infrastructure. Look at all of the eastern part of the state. The driver, and so essentially what this is each of these colors is which is the most significant contributor to population change over this year. And so if we look, East Texas, the eastern part of the state from I-35 eastward, it's almost all from domestic migration, and much of it is happening quite quickly, though we do see that happening in a lot of counties out west as well. We do have in the Panhandle and much of West Texas growth, population decline from out-migration, and we do have some counties that have natural decrease, more people dying than being born, but not many of them. Where are people coming from, the domestic migrants? I guess I probably could have asked that before I put the slide up and everybody would have gotten the answer right. California is the net biggest sender of domestic migrants, but we can also see that New York, Louisiana, and Florida, Maryland are also big senders most recently. These also change from year to year. So except for California is almost always there, and Florida is almost always there, and Louisiana. Those three are consistently pretty high senders to Texas. When we look at the place of birth of Texas, you can see that most people living in Texas are from Texas, but we have a significant proportion of our population that's foreign-born. So we certainly have a very significant international population here. And then kind of you can see those states that I was just talking about that are sending migrants. One of the things we've seen since the recession, the 2007-8 recession, is declining birth rates. And that's been happening across the United States, but Texas has been kind of late to the game in terms of declining birth rates. But we've seen declining birth rates, and that's largely happening because women are delaying childbearing. So that if you kind of highlight here, you kind of look in 2009 and 2019, you can see the proportion of the birth rates are higher among older women in 2019 than they are in 2009, and higher among younger women in 2009. Essentially, if women delay childbearing, that means they're going to have fewer children over their childbearing years. And so that brings birth rates, or what we refer to as the total fertility rates, down. And that essentially means that if you have fewer and fewer births, we also have the baby boom aging into the high mortality years, that we're getting to a point where potentially we'll start having natural decrease in the state. It's going to take a while, but if birth rates continue to decline or stay where they are right now, and the death rates from the baby boom start increasing, we're going to start seeing population decline from natural decrease. However, that's being offset by people moving here. And then this is just kind of highlighting what I was just talking about by race and ethnicity. One of the reasons Texas had high birth rates historically was because we have a large Latino population, and historically Latinos have had high birth rates. But with the recession, we saw that decline, and then it declined a little bit further going into the pandemic. And then we've seen in the last couple of years a slight uptick in terms of birth rates for the Hispanic population and for the non-Hispanic white population. I'm sorry, for the Asian population. Okay, so I'm talking about the age structure here and the impacts of declining birth rates. And if you look at 2010 and 2020 and kind of look at those people that in 2010 were 0 or 1 year of age, they're 10 years of age now in 2020. And you can see at the bottom of the population pyramid an indentation there. That's because these birth rates have been going down. And so that's going to stay with us and kind of move up. It's going to be offset some by people moving in, by migrants moving in, but still we have this indentation, and conceivably that will continue unless birth rates go up and perhaps mortality rates don't go up quite as fast as I think they might. Okay, so looking at where we are in terms of population growth, let's see here. We've produced a number of projections. So this is our projection from using data from last decades, or one of our projections from last decade, 2014 projection, where we were projecting 54 million Texans by 2060. And then if we look at our next set of projections, you can see it's kind of come down a little bit. And then our most recent set, where we have come down even more. Now this is happening largely because of what I was just showing you in terms of the declining birth rates. I have put these different projections up, and sometimes I'll get people kind of concerned that Texas isn't growing as fast as we thought. And I'm kind of like, everything I'm talking about in infrastructure takes a long time and it's really expensive. And so when you're growing really fast and you have something that that the population needs and it takes a long time and it's really expensive, it tends to not keep up with the demand. And so from my perspective, our projections now of slightly slower population growth are probably a good thing for Texas. We're still growing. I'm not anticipating that we're going to decline or we're going to start population decline. We're not even going to stay level. We're going to continue to grow, but not quite as fast. And hopefully that will give us a chance to breathe and catch up. I certainly know this legislative session, water is like a big issue down the road here. And so hopefully we'll be getting some significant resources and some of the strategies and plans that the Water Development Board has been developing are going to continue to do well and do well in the legislative session, and that we'll have resources and we'll get caught back up to where we're not feeling stressed around water. And actually the same thing is true for power and for transportation as well. When we look at the projected population and where that projected population growth is expected to occur, you can see that it looks very similar to the first map that I put up. That most of the growth we're projecting will be occurring in the population triangle. But again, that's more and more people. And I'm assuming that many of you probably live in some of these areas, and as I said earlier, you have seen the growth occurring, seen congestion occurring, seen all the housing being built, and that's not going to stop. I mean, sometimes I find myself like driving around. When I first got to San Antonio, and I moved there for this position in 2008, San Antonio was kind of a easy city to get around in, to drive around in. Things were pretty relaxed there. And I showed you earlier, San Antonio was the fastest growing city in the country last year or a couple years ago. And now you go there and it's just like you're in traffic jams, there's construction everywhere. It's just much more intense. And part of that is, again, that the infrastructure is not necessarily developed to kind of handle all of that. And it makes life, it impacts our quality of life. I mean, if we don't keep up with infrastructure, our quality of life is going to deteriorate. That's kind of a given, that we kind of have to invest in infrastructure, especially knowing that we're going to continue to grow. I mean, I come back and I think when I first moved to San Antonio, I was like, oh, this is like great. It's like a great city. Actually, San Antonio still is a great city, but but it used to be like so easy, and now it's kind of seems like it's kind of hard. And then of course I was living there for the big freeze, and that was kind of like not a pleasant experience for anybody that was here. And so you start thinking, it's like, well, that's, if I'm feeling uncomfortable, and as much as I love Texas, it's kind of like, well, I wouldn't mind maybe moving out to the country a little bit and kind of getting away from kind of the density and the problems that are associated with that. And then again, you also are constantly hearing stories. I mean, I'm constantly, I know that the San Antonio water systems puts out all kinds of media things, but constantly hearing about water restrictions and strategies that you can use to save water and so on and so forth. When I first moved there, nobody was talking about that. I mean, I wasn't hearing about that. And then slowly they started putting water restrictions on irrigate or watering your lawn, and now they've kind of done tiered pricing. And so those are good strategies, but historically it was kind of like I didn't have to worry about that stuff. I didn't have to worry about my water bill. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. But now it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to pay less if I don't use as much water. I'm not going to go up to this other tier. So again, I think anticipating that we're going to grow and that we're going to continue to grow, maybe not as fast as we had projected previously, but we definitely have to invest substantially and aggressively in ensuring that we have access to water and that that water is in the places where we need it. And that's one of our big challenges, I think. I mean, as you saw in East Texas, we actually have a fair amount of water. But in West Texas, we don't. So how do you get the water from East Texas to West Texas? Because I know that at one point Governor Abbott was exploring that, getting Houston, I think, to send water. I can't remember where he wanted to send it to, but you think about the cost of doing that and the energy that it would take to do that, because it's not like it's flat or even going downhill. I mean, you kind of have to pump the water up to wherever it is. Any place that you're going west of I-35, where there definitely is a demand for water, going to be a demand for water, and still is, it's going to really struggle in terms of being able to get water there. When we look at what I refer to as the speed of change, percent change, you can see again the suburban ring counties projected to grow rapidly. And then if you look at the Permian Basin, and especially I think right now, certainly I think the United States is poised to try to ramp up domestic oil production. That's likely to result in more and more employment opportunities occurring in the Permian Basin. And so, we're likely to see, more and fairly significant growth occurring in that area. And of course, fracking is a water-intensive industry, and then you have more and more people there that need water. So that's kind of I think a challenge. And the same thing if you kind of look at Lubbock and Amarillo, and actually El Paso as well, and much of West Texas, that we're going to likely continue to have an elevated demand for water in a place where there's real significant limitations in terms of water. Last couple of slides here, I'm going to just talk a little bit about projected age structure. Here we're looking at 2020 and our projected 2060 age structure. You can see that essentially Texas is going to get older, and we're likely to see fewer and fewer younger people as a proportion of our total population. Actually, the next slide I think is percentage. But we're likely to have fewer and fewer younger people in the state relative to as a proportion. When we look at this proportionally, you can see that again, the population is going to be aging, and that's happening not just in Texas, it's happening all over the United States. Texas is happening a little bit more slowly, but it's definitely getting to be an older population. Okay, so I'm kind of done talking about demographics. Let me just highlight a little bit about the Texas Demographic Center. Here we have, if you have this QR code, you can kind of get all kinds of stuff about on our website. We have social media. Feel free to follow us. We put up little vizzes every week, kind of highlighting different facts about Texas and demographics. And then our conference we're going to have on May 21st to 22nd in the Dallas area. If you're interested in that, kind of either sign up for one of our social media things, you'll get notified about it. The conference is usually pretty good. Water Development Board usually participates pretty heavily in the conference, and a number of other state agencies as well. So we certainly would welcome you and love to have you at our conference in May. Okay, so I think that's all I got. Okay, thank you very much.